If I had listened to her that day, maybe I wouldn't have ended up in the hospital." Melania's voice was calm, but something in her eyes flickered. She sat alone in the back garden, early morning light falling through the branches, and in her lap a small, worn leather book. It had belonged to her mother. Her mother had passed just 3 months ago. Not suddenly, not peacefully either. It was one of those slow, silent losses, the kind that steal a person day by day until only their scent remains on the pillow. Melania hadn't cried at the funeral. She had smiled, nodded, shaken hands. But inside, something had cracked. And today, she finally opened the little book again. Her mother had once told her, "These rules won't make you famous, but they might help you reach 90 with your dignity still intact." She had laughed at the time. But now, with everything she had learned, lost, and nearly ruined, Melania wasn't laughing anymore. "Stay with me," she whispered softly, turning to the first page. "Because some of these rules might save your life too." The first page was stained slightly at the edges, as if it had been touched many times, maybe even carried in a coat pocket for years. Melania traced the faded ink with her fingertip. Rule number 1. Wake up with the light. Your body understands the sun better than any doctor. Her mother had said it every morning without fail, no matter the weather, no matter the season. She would throw open the curtains and say, "Let the light tell your cells it's time to live." Back then, Melania had rolled her eyes. Late nights, long events, jet lag, light didn't matter. Coffee existed for a reason. But that all changed 3 years ago. She was exhausted. Constantly, her moods shifted. Her energy crashed after lunch. And then came the migraines. Doctors ran every test imaginable. But nothing made sense until one quiet naturopath in Florida asked her, "Do you still wake with the sun?" She looked up now, squinting into the early light filtering through the leaves. "She was right," Melania whispered. "I was always better when I listened to her." And with a deep breath, she turned to the next page. The second page of the book felt heavier, as if it carried more than just words. The paper was slightly thicker, and there was a small pressed flower tucked between the fold, dried, delicate, and nearly falling apart. Melania smiled faintly. She remembered the flower. They had picked it together in Slovenia when she was a teenager. Her mother had insisted on walking instead of driving through the countryside that day, even though the sun was hot and the hills steep. Melania had complained the entire time. But her mother had said something that stuck, something now written across the top of that second page. Rule number 2. Walk until your heart no longer races from your thoughts. At the time, Melania thought it was poetry, maybe a metaphor, but now, in her late 50s, with the memory of her mother's final months still fresh in her mind, she understood the meaning all too well. Back then, her mother walked every day. No fancy gym, no personal trainer, just walking, morning and afternoon. She never called it exercise. She called it movement with purpose. Melania had lost that rhythm over the years. Too many cars, planes, security schedules. The world moved fast and she'd let it carry her with it. But after her mother's passing, something changed. On one of her darkest days, Melania had taken her mother's old coat and walked aimlessly through Central Park, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. She had walked until her legs ached, and for the first time in months, her mind didn't. That was the moment she understood. Her mother wasn't just talking about steps. She was talking about stillness, the kind that only comes when your feet keep moving, even when your heart is heavy. Maybe she knew all along, Melania whispered, that the body can carry the soul, even when the soul forgets how to move. The breeze picked up slightly, brushing the pages forward. The next rule was waiting, and Melania wasn't ready. But she turned the page anyway. Rule number 3. Never eat when your heart is heavy. Melania stared at the sentence for a long moment. It was short, almost too simple, but it struck her harder than she expected. She could see her mother again, standing in their small kitchen, arms crossed, waiting. Melania had just come home from school, tears in her eyes, backpack thrown on the floor. She had reached for the breadbasket without a word. Her mother had stopped her with a single glance. "You don't eat to swallow pain," she had said. "You eat to feed the body, not to bury the soul." At the time, Melania had stormed off. But she never forgot those words. And now, as she sat in the stillness of her garden, she realized how many times she had broken that rule as an adult. After stress, after loneliness, after public humiliation. How many meals had been eaten with clenched teeth and a broken spirit. Her mother had known the damage that did, not just to the waistline, but to the nervous system, the gut, even the heart. Emotions digest too, her mother had once whispered. And when you mix grief with food, it stays longer than you want. Melania closed her eyes for a moment and breathed in. She hadn't truly felt hunger in days, but maybe that was okay. Maybe what she needed wasn't a meal, but a memory. She looked up at the camera, or maybe just past it, not trying to impress, but to connect. If you've ever eaten just to make the pain stop, please stay with me. There's something you need to hear by the end of this. Her fingers moved gently to the next page, because some rules are warnings. Melania turned to the page, but before reading the next line, she just stared at the paper, not reading, only remembering. There had been a day, years ago, when everything nearly fell apart. A private scare, not something the public ever heard about. She had collapsed backstage only minutes before a major appearance. Shortness of breath, a spinning room, trembling hands. They called it a panic attack, but the truth went deeper. Her mother had known something like this would happen. She had seen the way Melania pushed herself, stayed silent, swallowed stress with smiles. She once told her, "Silence is only golden when it heals. If it hides pain, it becomes poison." That phrase had haunted Melania, because that was exactly what she had done, poisoned herself with restraint. She had skipped rest, hidden fatigue, avoided her own reflection. And then came the collapse. Melania exhaled, fingers gripping the edge of the page. Her mother used to say, "You can outrun people, you can outrun headlines, but you will never outrun your own nervous system." That line had saved her. It was the reason she had learned to pause, to breathe, to step outside without her phone. Not for show, but for survival. She looked up again, voice barely above a whisper. "If you've been running too long, if you're tired but don't even know why, please stay, because what's coming next might be the reminder you didn't know you needed." And with that, she gently folded the edge of the next page, as if steadying herself for whatever truth would follow. The next page was blank at first glance, no quote, no line. Just a faint, penciled outline of a leaf, pressed and faded, almost invisible now. Melania tilted the page toward the light, and only then did the ink reveal itself, faint, as if written in hesitation. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Her breath caught for a moment. That one she had ignored the longest. She remembered coming home one summer during college. She'd been thin, pale, exhausted, but smiling, always smiling. Her mother hadn't said anything for days. Then one morning, while folding laundry, she had looked up and quietly said, "You don't sleep anymore, do you?" Melania hadn't answered. But now, nearly 30 years later, she realized just how much her body had carried, all the stress, the sleep deprivation, the pain she never voiced. And it was showing. It showed in the way she struggled to wake up. It showed in the stiffness in her neck, in the way her heart raced in stillness, in the shadows beneath her eyes that no makeup could hide anymore. Her mother had always known that the body kept score, even when we pretend we're fine. Melania gently closed the book for a moment, placing her hand on top of it. "If you're watching this, and you're tired in a way you can't explain, please keep listening," she said softly. "Because your body is listening too, and it remembers everything you've been through, even the things you thought you left behind." The wind picked up. A few leaves stirred in the grass. And slowly, she opened the book again. One more page, one more memory waiting to surface. Melania's fingers lingered on the next page longer than usual. The edges were worn, as if it had been opened more often than the rest. A crease down the center, a small oil stain from her mother's fingertips. This page had been touched with life. The ink was darker, firmer, no hesitation this time. Never speak to yourself in a way you wouldn't speak to your own child. Melania swallowed hard. Her mother had told her that after a brutal magazine cover was released, one that criticized her posture, her tone, even her smile, she had locked herself in her room for hours that night, spiraling through every insult, every imagined flaw. When she finally opened the door, her mother didn't say much. She simply sat beside her, placed a cup of tea on the nightstand, and said quietly, "You'd never say those things to your son. So why are you saying them to yourself?" That question had stayed with her for years, ignored, suppressed, sometimes mocked internally. But after her mother's death, it echoed louder than ever. She began to realize how long she had lived with a voice in her head that didn't sound like her mother's, but like the critics, the headlines, the internet strangers. Her healing began the day she replaced that voice. She began asking herself, would I say this to a child who was hurting? And if the answer was no, she said something else, something kinder, something true. Now sitting in the quiet garden, that voice returned, gentle, firm, and hers. "You're still becoming." She looked up, her voice low but certain. "If you've been cruel to yourself in ways no one else hears, please stay. Because healing doesn't start with doctors. It starts with the words you use when no one is listening." The page turned without effort this time. She was ready. There was a pressed ribbon tucked into this page, soft beige, fraying at the edges. It smelled faintly of lavender. Melania recognized it instantly. It had been tied around her mother's hairbrush, the one she used every night, even into her 70s. And just beneath the ribbon, written in smaller handwriting than the others, "Routines heal what medicine cannot." Melania smiled. It wasn't glamorous advice. It wasn't some groundbreaking revelation, but it was real. Her mother had lived by rhythm, not because life was simple, but because chaos was always waiting at the door. She woke at the same time, ate at the same table, brushed her hair exactly 100 strokes before bed. Not because she believed in superstition, but because ritual calmed the nervous system, even when the world outside did not. Melania hadn't understood that in her younger years. To her, routine had meant boredom, restriction, even weakness. She chased variety, change, spontaneity. But as the years passed, she began to crave the very stability she once resisted. It started after a long stretch of insomnia. No pills had helped. No apps, no fancy teas. Until one night, she remembered her mother brushing her hair, slowly, methodically, whispering to her younger self, "We teach the body safety by being consistent." Melania got up, walked to the bathroom, and brushed her hair. She slept through the night for the first time in weeks. She paused now, eyes lowered, voice soft but steady. If your days feel like noise, if your nights feel like they never end, maybe it's not your age, maybe it's the absence of rhythm. Stay with me, because the next lesson my mother left me, it changed everything. A breeze moved through the garden, almost as if her mother had heard. The page was slightly torn at the bottom corner, as if it had once been pulled too quickly, maybe during an argument, maybe during grief. Melania didn't remember when it happened, but the scar in the paper mirrored the one in her heart. The words on this page were shorter, fewer than any before, just 5. "Carry love, not guilt, forward." She blinked. Her mother had said that once, but not to her, to herself. Melania had overheard it one night, long ago. Her mother was standing alone in the kitchen, pouring tea, speaking softly as if to an empty room. She had been grieving the loss of her own sister back then. Carry love, not guilt, forward. Back then, Melania didn't fully grasp what it meant. Now with her mother gone, the weight of those 5 words landed like a whisper wrapped in stone. Because Melania had guilt, a lot of it. For not calling more often, for not visiting enough, for brushing off health advice with a polite nod, for assuming there would always be more time. She'd spent the first month after the funeral spiraling through memories, but only the wrong ones. The ones filled with what she didn't do, what she missed, what she should have said. Until one night, her son, quiet, thoughtful, came to her room and asked, "What did Grandma always say when you felt bad about something?" And just like that, she remembered. Not the pain, not the regret, but her mother's voice, clear and kind. "Take the love with you. Leave the rest where it happened." Melania looked up now, her voice shaking just slightly. "If you've lost someone, and guilt is louder than memory, stay with me. You deserve to carry love, nothing else." She gently pressed the torn corner back into place and turned the page. Eyes a little wetter, heart a little lighter. This page was different. There were no ink stains, no fading, no tears. It was clean, almost untouched, as if her mother had written it and then never returned to change a single word. At the center, in perfect, even handwriting, "You are not your age. You are how well you've cared for what carries you." Melania let the words settle. She had spent years being defined by numbers, media headlines, approval ratings, age, weight, polling data. But her mother never once asked how old she felt. She only ever asked, "How's your walk? Are you sleeping? Did your hands feel strong today?" Because to her, age wasn't the number of candles. It was the strength of your breath, the calm of your mornings, the peace in your gut. And now, sitting here, with a mind finally quiet and a heart still grieving, Melania saw it clearly. She wasn't tired because she was older. She was tired because she hadn't taken care of what carried her, her body, her mind, her soul. And now she was trying to remember the things her mother had known all along. She leaned back, eyes scanning the garden, the sky above her beginning to shift into the softer tones of late afternoon. If you're afraid of aging, if the mirror has become something you avoid ... She paused, her voice warm, like a friend, not a teacher. "Stay with me, because the next page. It reminded me that growing older isn't a curse, it's a privilege. But only if we treat it like one." She placed her hand gently over the notebook, just for a moment, as if thanking it, and turned to the next chapter of her mother's wisdom. The next page was handwritten in a slightly shakier script, still her mother's, but written later, when age had begun to slow her hands. It wasn't less powerful. In fact, the trembling lines seemed to carry more weight. Melania read it aloud, almost instinctively. "If your home is cluttered, your mind will be too." She laughed gently. She was always blunt, she whispered. This was one of the things she used to mock in her head. The way her mother couldn't rest unless the dishes were done, unless the shoes were aligned at the door, unless the blankets were folded just so. But now, decades later, she realized what her mother had been trying to protect. Peace. Not perfection, but peace. After her mother passed, Melania returned to the house in Slovenia to sort through what was left behind. And there, in every drawer, every folded cloth, every small, neat jar labeled by hand, she found clarity. Not because the house was clean, but because it reflected a mind that had made space for stillness. Melania had always lived in polished homes, but not always peaceful ones. The chaos she allowed in her schedule, in her emails, in her mind, it had lived quietly in every crowded closet and every forgotten drawer. So she began to clean, not to impress, not for guests, but to give her mind a place to breathe. She looked up now, her voice soft and steady. "If you feel overwhelmed, if you can't think straight, start with one drawer, one shelf, one small surface that belongs to you. And as you clear it, listen to what your body tells you. Because sometimes the path to peace begins in the places we ignore." She turned the page without hurry, And somewhere deep inside, she knew her mother would have smiled at that. The next page had a coffee ring in the corner, imperfect, human, real. Melania smiled when she saw it. Her mother had always warned against coasters. "Let the table show it's been lived on," she used to say. The words on this page were slightly slanted, written during a moment of emotion, maybe even urgency. You can't numb the body without numbing the joy. Melania sat still. She remembered when her mother first said that, after Melania had complained about her stiff back, her constant fatigue, the way every part of her felt. Dulled, she had been reaching for painkillers every week, sleeping pills every other night. Nothing dramatic, nothing dangerous, but her mother had seen it. She always did. "You're not broken," she had said, handing her daughter a hot towel and gently massaging her shoulders. "You're just exhausted from silencing your body's voice." Back then, Melania had brushed it off. Now she felt it in her bones. Because she had numbed herself, with noise, with appointments, with distractions, even with kindness. She had numbed the pain, yes. But in doing so, she had also dulled the joy. She hadn't laughed the same, hadn't tasted food fully. Even hugs had felt hollow. It wasn't until she started listening, really listening, that the numbness began to lift. Stretching before coffee, walking barefoot in the garden, letting herself cry without apologizing, letting herself laugh without lowering her voice. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and said quietly, "If you felt nothing for too long, not pain, not happiness, not anything, please stay. What's coming next might remind you what it feels like to be alive again." And with that, she reached for the next page, her hands just slightly steadier than before. This page was written in red ink, the only one. Her mother must have run out of blue, or maybe she wanted this to stand out. It did. The handwriting was larger, uneven in places, as if written quickly, with urgency. "People who age with grace. Let go before the weight breaks them." Melania felt her breath catch. Letting go. Her mother had always spoken about it, but never as a soft, passive thing. To her, letting go was an act of strength, not surrender. She let go of people who didn't listen. Let go of expectations she never asked for. Let go of things that didn't serve her, habits, regrets, old identities. Melania had always admired that. And yet, she had never truly done it herself. She held on to responsibilities that weren't hers, to guilt she hadn't earned, to an image she didn't even believe in anymore. Even now, after everything, she still felt that grip in her chest when she thought about being misunderstood, or not being enough, or not doing more. But her mother had once told her, "You are not a net. You were not born to catch everything and everyone." And now, in this moment of quiet reflection, Melania began to loosen the grip, just a little. "If you're still carrying things that should have been put down years ago, stay with me," she said gently. "Because the next truth my mother left behind, it freed me." Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the next page. And for the first time that day, she felt a weight begin to lift, not all of it, but enough to breathe a little deeper. "What you do today becomes your body tomorrow. Double quotes. No poetry. No metaphor, just truth." Her mother had written that after a minor stroke, one that didn't make the news, but changed everything. Melania had rushed home the moment she heard. She remembered sitting by her mother's bedside, watching her struggle to move one hand, whispering, "It was just a little mistake. I knew something felt off, but I waited too long." That's what haunted Melania the most. Not the illness itself, but the silence before it. The ignored symptoms, the missed appointments, the subtle signs brushed off as aging. Her mother had looked her in the eye and said, "It's not the big choices that break us. It's the small ones we pretend don't matter." Since then, Melania had changed everything. She went to her checkups. She listened to her gut. She drank more water, stretched her back, moved after sitting too long. She stopped waiting until it was urgent to take care of herself. And as she read that final message again, she felt a quiet fire inside her, not of fear, but of determination. If you're waiting for a reason to take your body seriously, this is it, she said, eyes steady. Don't wait for pain. Don't wait for regret. Today is enough. You are enough. Then slowly, she turned to the final page. One more breath, one last truth. The final page had no decoration, no ribbon, no flower. Just the last line her mother would ever write in that book. It sat alone in the center of the page, underlined once. Not for emphasis, but for reverence. A long life means nothing if you don't feel alive while living it. Melania didn't speak at first. She just sat there, holding the book like something sacred. She had read that line many times before, but today it felt different, heavier, and somehow lighter all at once. Her mother hadn't been obsessed with longevity. She didn't chase years, she chased meaning inside the years. She sang while sweeping. She smiled at birds like they were old friends. She called thunderstorms conversations between the heavens. She cried when she needed to, and laughed when no one else was laughing. Melania realized her mother hadn't just lived long, she had lived deep, fully, present, brave enough to feel everything. And now, Melania, First Lady, mother, public figure, sat there as only a daughter, eyes misted, voice soft. If you're focused only on how long you'll live, you might miss the point. She closed the book gently, both hands on the cover now. My mother didn't give me rules. She gave me reminders. To breathe. To feel. To show up, even for the smallest moments. She looked straight ahead, as if speaking to someone just on the edge of the screen. If something in you stirred during this story, hold on to it. That stirring is life. Don't let it fade. Melania closed the book and rested it gently on her lap, her hand still holding the memory. Then, looking directly at the viewer, not as a public figure, but simply as a daughter, she said softly, if you've lost someone, if you've been carrying lessons in your heart without knowing what to do with them, let this be the moment you start living differently. She paused, not for effect, but for sincerity. And if this story reminded you of your own mother, or maybe even of yourself, share it in the comments. I want to hear it. Someone else might need it too. Her voice grew steadier now, filled with quiet strength. Subscribe if you believe that growing older doesn't mean fading away, but growing deeper, stronger, wiser. Because the next story might be the one that changes something in you, or someone you love. And with a final glance, full of grace and gratitude, she whispered, take care of what carries you. And I'll see you again, very soon.